What happens when a middle-aged man compares his life to everyone else's success and slowly realizes he was winning all along without knowing it? Let's find out. Brad ran a small nonprofit organization that focused on raising money for charity. One morning, he was having breakfast at a restaurant with one of his employees when, out of nowhere, the employee said he wanted to quit. He explained that at his age, he could earn much more money elsewhere. He even said that maybe he could start his own fundraising company like Brad's, but make it far more successful because he was still young. Those words hit Brad hard. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the conversation in his head. He started thinking about when he first started his business, full of ambition and big dreams. Decades had passed, yet he felt he had not achieved the level of success he once imagined. When he compared himself to his old friends, who were now far more accomplished, he felt like a failure. He remembered a recent reunion with those friends. One had become a famous Hollywood director. Another owned a large company. One worked in the government and often appeared on television. Another had already retired and was living comfortably off his investments. Compared to them, Brad felt small and unsuccessful. He felt jealous, even though his own life was not bad at all. He owned a car and a nice house, and his only son was well-behaved and did well in school. Still, he couldn't stop comparing himself to others. The next day, Brad traveled with his son Troy to Boston so Troy could apply for college. At the airport, while waiting for their flight, the two of them sat quietly. Like many fathers and sons, they weren't very close, and conversation didn't come easily. Brad tried to start talking, but it felt awkward. On the plane, Brad's thoughts started racing again. He started thinking about his wife. Back in college, Brad had been ambitious and driven. His wife, on the other hand, had always been simple and grateful for what she had. She never pushed for more. Brad felt that after marrying her, his ambition slowly faded. He compared her to the wives of his friends, who were also successful and driven women. In his mind, he convinced himself that his friend's success must have been influenced by their ambitious partners. When they arrived in Boston, Brad checked into a hotel and rested. That evening, over dinner, he asked Troy which university he wanted to apply to. Troy said he really wanted to study art at Harvard University. His high school teacher had told him that with his piano skills, he had a good chance, especially since a musician he admired was now teaching there. Back at the hotel, Brad kept looking at Troy and thinking about his future. He realized that his son had a lot of potential. He began to think that Troy's success could make up for his own unfulfilled ambitions. He imagined how proud he would feel if Troy graduated from Harvard and became a famous musician. For the first time in a while, his jealousy faded. He even thought that no matter how rich his friends were, their children might not be as impressive as his son. The next day, they went to Harvard for the admission process. Brad waited anxiously for the results. Soon, Troy came back with bad news. He had mixed up the dates. His interview was scheduled for the previous day, and registration was now closed. Outside the campus, Brad kept thinking about what to do. He called his wife, Melanie, and asked if she knew anyone who could help, maybe a lecturer or an alumnus. Melanie suggested contacting one of Brad's old college friends, Craig, who worked in the government and might have connections. Brad didn't like the idea. Years ago, when Brad was just starting his business, he had asked Craig to invest. Craig had seemed dismissive and never showed interest. Later, when Brad tried to stay in touch, Craig never replied to his emails. Brad felt ignored and looked down on. Still, for his son's sake, he swallowed his pride and asked another friend for Craig's number. During that call, the friend couldn't stop talking about his luxurious life in Hawaii, complete with a mansion and 2 girlfriends. Brad felt jealous again, but reminded himself to focus. When he finally called Craig, the number didn't work, so he left a voice message. The next morning, during breakfast, Craig called back. Brad explained Troy's situation and asked for help. Craig agreed, without much hesitation. He said he would be in Boston soon anyway, and could help arrange something. He even invited Brad to dinner. Relieved, Brad felt hopeful again. Later that day, Craig called to say he had managed to get Troy another interview at Harvard. Brad was overjoyed and immediately shared the news with Troy, who was clearly excited. Brad started imagining Troy's future again, picturing him as a famous musician bringing pride to the family. But his overthinking didn't stop. He began worrying about what would happen if Troy failed, if he didn't become successful, or if his friends mocked him even more. That night, Troy invited Brad to dinner with a senior from his high school named Ananya, who now studied at Harvard. Troy had performed with her at a charity orchestra before. During dinner, Brad was struck by Ananya's confidence and charm. Another friend, Maya, joined them as well. Brad couldn't help noticing how lively and passionate both women were. Seeing them reminded Brad of his wife when they first met. She used to be full of energy and passion, too. Over the years, that spark seemed to fade. His mind wandered again to his wealthy friend in Hawaii and his glamorous lifestyle. Brad began to wonder if success and money would have given him a different life, one filled with excitement and admiration, instead of the quiet, ordinary one he had now. After dinner, Ananya invited Brad to keep hanging out with her and some friends at a bar across the street. Brad wanted to go, but Troy couldn't join because he was underage and also needed to rest for his interview. Since Troy said no, Brad politely declined and went back to the hotel. Later that night, after Troy fell asleep, Brad quietly left the room and went to the bar anyway. He met Ananya there, and the two of them ended up talking for hours. They drank a bit too much, and Brad started opening up about his life. He talked about how disappointed he felt when he compared himself to his successful friends. He complained about how small his achievements seemed next to theirs and how unhappy that made him feel. Deep down, he hoped Ananya would comfort him or praise him the way he imagined his friends' wives would do. Instead, Ananya reacted very calmly. She didn't show much sympathy. She told him that life was hard for most people, not just him. There were many people who struggled just to afford food. She said that the people Brad thought had perfect lives probably had serious problems of their own. Comparing lives, she explained, was pointless. Life wasn't a competition, and there was no finish line where someone won. Hearing this from someone so much younger than him left Brad speechless. Before they parted, Ananya invited him to attend her orchestra concert the next night. The next morning, Brad took Troy back to Harvard for the interview. While waiting, he updated his wife on how things were going. After the interview ended, Troy came out smiling. He said the staff had been very welcoming, especially thanks to the person his father had contacted, and he felt confident he would be accepted. Brad felt relieved and proud. After that, they went to Tufts University to register as a backup option, just in case Harvard didn't work out. Brad told Troy that Tufts was where he had studied. While walking around campus, Brad stopped by a room to greet his former supervisor, only to be told that the man had passed away. Brad was shocked. No one had ever informed him. For a moment, he wondered if his old friends had ignored him because he wasn't as successful as they were. That evening, Brad got ready to meet Craig for dinner. At the restaurant, the waitress seated Brad near the kitchen door, where it was noisy and busy. When Craig arrived, the staff treated him very differently. He was greeted warmly, given a better table in the center of the restaurant, and even offered a special drink. Brad noticed all of this and felt uncomfortable. Once seated together, the two old friends talked about the past. Brad thanked Craig again for helping Troy with the Harvard interview. At first, the conversation felt friendly, but as time passed, Craig started talking about their old friends. While laughing, he revealed one embarrassing secret after another. He claimed that he was the only truly successful one. One friend had almost gone to jail for tax issues. Another had a seriously ill child who needed urgent surgery. Another had failed badly in business and ran away to Hawaii. Craig also said that the private jets their friends bragged about weren't even theirs, but paid for with company money they had misused. Brad listened in shock. His mind drifted as Craig kept talking. He suddenly realized that success and status didn't guarantee happiness. He also wondered what kind of problems Craig himself might be hiding. It felt like a wake-up call. Brad saw clearly that his own life wasn't bad at all. He didn't have much money, but his family was happy. He had no debts. His son was healthy and kind. His small company had run smoothly for decades and maintained good relationships. Brad felt foolish. He realized that his obsession with looking successful had pushed him to force things, especially with Troy and Harvard. He had even gone back to asking Craig for help, someone who had once looked down on him and still hadn't apologized for it. Suddenly, all the frustration he'd been holding inside came out. Brad snapped and angrily told Craig how he really felt. Then he stood up, left the restaurant, and didn't look back. Instead, Brad went to join Troy at the orchestra concert. He told his son that he would rather spend the evening with him. As he listened to Ananya and Maya perform, the music calmed him. It made him feel emotional, but also peaceful. He started to understand that he had been taking his life for granted. Back at the hotel later that night, Troy surprised Brad by saying he didn't want to go to Harvard anymore. Earlier that day, while touring Tufts, he had really liked the place. The campus felt welcoming, the professors were kind, and the students seemed friendly. Troy asked if his father was okay, jokingly wondering if he was having a nervous breakdown. He admitted that he had been afraid of what people thought of him. He worried that others saw him as a failure. Troy listened carefully and then said he used to feel the same way. He once believed people would remember his mistakes forever, but over time, he realized that most people were too busy thinking about themselves to judge others. His embarrassing moments didn't matter as much as he thought. Troy told his father that instead of worrying about strangers' opinions, it made more sense to care about the people who truly mattered. For Brad, that was his family. Brad asked Troy what he thought of him. Troy smiled and said he loved him. That answer meant more to Brad than anything else he had heard in years. Later, as Brad lay in bed looking at his sleeping son, he reflected on everything. He had raised a good child with his wife. His life was full of stability and love. Why had he spent so much time comparing himself to others? He finally understood that life wasn't a race. There was no prize for being better than someone else. All he needed to do was enjoy what he had and be grateful for it.